My name is Elena, and if you had asked me 24 hours ago who I was, I would have told you I was the luckiest woman in Seattle. I would have told you I was the wife of Richard Sterling, the newly appointed CFO of Titan Tech. I would have told you that after 5 years of struggle, poverty, and sacrifice, we had finally made it. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Sometimes, right when you think you are crossing the finish line, you realize you were running a race that ended years ago without you knowing. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years. Half a decade. In the grand scheme of the universe, it's a blink of an eye. But for me, those 5 years were a lifetime. They were 5 years of eating instant noodles so Richard could afford his MBA textbooks. 5 years of wearing the same winter coat with a hole in the pocket so Richard could buy Italian suits for his interviews. 5 years of working double shifts at a diner, my feet swelling until they bled, just to pay the mortgage on a house that Richard insisted had to be in his name, for tax purposes. I gave him my youth. I gave him my savings. I gave him every ounce of light I had, until I was nothing but a shadow walking in his wake. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was the celebration of our victory. I remember staring at the clock on the wall. It was an old antique clock my grandmother had given me, one of the few things I still owned. The rhythmic ticking sound, tick-tock, usually soothed me, but tonight it sounded like a hammer hitting an anvil. It was 10:45 p.m. Outside, Seattle was drowning in a storm. The rain wasn't just falling, it was attacking the earth. It lashed against the large bay windows of our suburban home, creating a blurry, distorted view of the world outside. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful, angry sound that made the house creak. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rosemary, garlic, and expensive red wine. I had spent the entire day preparing. I had taken a personal day off from my job, a job I was overqualified for but kept because it paid the bills while Richard built his career. I had gone to the market early in the morning, picking out the freshest lamb, the crispest vegetables. I had slow roasted the leg of lamb for 6 hours, basting it every 30 minutes just the way he liked it. I had set the table with our wedding china, the plates we were too afraid to use because they were too nice. I lit taper candles, their flames dancing nervously in the drafty room. Everything was perfect, except for the empty chair opposite me. I picked up my phone for the 100th time. No messages, no calls, just the glowing screen mocking me with the time, 10:48 p.m. Maybe traffic is bad because of the storm, I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling. Maybe a last-minute meeting, I tried to convince myself. I tried to suppress the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, that intuition every woman has but ignores because the truth is too painful to face. The truth that the man I loved had been distant for months, the late nights, the new passwords on his phone, the way he flinched when I touched him, as if my affection was a disease. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness outside, sweeping across the living room walls. My heart leaped. He was here. I quickly checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I was wearing a deep blue silk dress. It was 5 years old, the same dress I wore on our honeymoon. It was a little tight now, and the color had faded slightly, but Richard used to say it made me look like an ocean he wanted to drown in. I pinched my cheeks to bring some color back into my pale, anxious face. I smoothed my hair. I put on a smile, a brave, welcoming smile. The front door lock clicked. The handle turned. "Happy anniversary, The words died in my throat. Richard walked in, shaking a wet umbrella, but he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm, laughing as if they were walking into a comedy club and not my home, was a woman. She was stunning. There was no other word for it. She looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine cover. She was tall, with cascading blonde hair that looked like spun gold, even when damp from the rain. She wore a white trench coat that probably cost more than my car, and underneath, a shimmering red cocktail dress that hugged every curve. But it wasn't her beauty that paralyzed me. It was the way she looked at Richard, possessive, confident, like she owned him. And the way Richard looked at her, he was looking at her with a hunger he hadn't shown me in years. They stopped in the entryway. The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier than the storm outside. "Richard?" I managed to choke out. My voice sounded small, pathetic. "What? Who is this?" Richard didn't rush to explain. He didn't look guilty. He didn't stutter. He simply unbuttoned his coat, hung it up, and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was boredom. Cold, clinical boredom. "Hello, Elena," he said, his voice flat. He gestured to the woman. "This is Jessica. Jessica, this is Elena." He introduced me like I was a distant acquaintance, not his wife of 5 years, not the woman who paid for his suits. Jessica smiled. It wasn't a warm smile, it was a predator's grin. She stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors I had scrubbed on my hands and knees just yesterday. "So, this is the famous Elena," Jessica said, her voice syrupy sweet but laced with poison. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my faded blue dress with amused pity. "Richard told me you were quaint." He wasn't lying. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Richard, what is going on? It's our anniversary. Why is she here?" Richard sighed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. He walked past me into the dining room, ignoring the candles, the cold food, the effort. He went straight to the liquor cabinet and poured 2 glasses of scotch. He handed one to Jessica and took a long sip of his own. "We need to talk, Elena," he said, turning to face me. "And I brought Jessica because she is part of this conversation. In fact, she is the conversation." "I don't understand," I stammered, gripping the back of a chair for support. My legs felt like jelly. "It's simple math, Elena," Richard said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Look at where I am now. I'm the CFO of Titan Tech. I'm meeting with investors from Tokyo, London, Dubai. I need a partner who fits that world, someone who knows how to dress, how to talk, how to influence people." He pointed a finger at me, a gesture of accusation. "And look at you. You're a waitress turned receptionist. You wear clothes from discount bins. You have no connections. You have no ambition beyond making this mediocre house comfortable. You were fine for the struggling years, Elena. You were a good stepping stone. But I've reached the top now, and you don't belong at the top." A stepping stone. That's what I was to him. 5 years of love reduced to a piece of pavement he stepped on to get somewhere better. "I built you," I whispered, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. "I worked 2 jobs so you could study. I paid for this house. I paid for your car." "Correction," Jessica interjected, sipping her drink casually. "You paid for his house. It's in his name, sweetie. And the car? Also in his name. Richard is smart. He planned ahead." I looked at Richard, begging him to deny it, begging him to tell me this was a sick joke. "Richard? Tell her she's wrong." Richard set his glass down on the table, right next to the cold roast lamb. "She's right, Elena. Legally, you have nothing. But I'm not a monster. I'm a realist." He reached into his inner suit pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the table. It slid across the lace tablecloth and stopped inches from my hand. "These are divorce papers," he said. "I've already signed them. And inside, there's a check for $10,000. Consider it severance pay for your 5 years of service. It's enough for you to rent a studio apartment somewhere, far away from here. Maybe back in that small town you came from." "Severance pay?" I screamed, my voice cracking. "I am your wife, not your employee." "Stop screaming," Richard snapped, his mask of calm slipping for a second. "You're embarrassing yourself. This is exactly why I'm leaving you. You're too emotional, too dramatic. Jessica is calm. Jessica is sophisticated." "Jessica is sleeping with a married man," I yelled back. Jessica laughed. "Oh, honey, morality is for poor people. We operate on opportunity." Just then, the sound of a heavy door opening echoed from the hallway leading to the guest suite. My stomach turned. I knew who it was. It was the final nail in my coffin. My mother-in-law, Martha Sterling. Martha had moved in with us 2 years ago after her husband passed away. I had welcomed her. I had given her the master suite on the ground floor because she complained about her knees. I cooked her special meals because of her delicate digestion. I drove her to her bridge club, her doctor's appointments, her hair salon. And in return, she treated me like a servant. She criticized my cleaning. She mocked my parents for being blue-collar workers. She constantly reminded me that I was barren because we hadn't had children yet, even though the doctors said the problem was likely with Richard, not me. Martha walked into the dining room. She was wearing a silk kimono I had bought her for Christmas, using my bonus check. She leaned heavily on her cane, her silver hair perfectly coiffed even at this hour. I looked at her, a desperate hope rising in my chest. Surely she would side with me. Surely she would see that her son was destroying a sacred vow. I had taken care of her when she had the flu. I had held her hand when she cried about her late husband. "Martha," I sobbed, "please, tell him this is wrong." Martha stopped in the middle of the room. She looked at the divorce papers on the table. She looked at Jessica, who gave her a polite, knowing nod. Then she looked at Richard. "Is it done?" Martha asked, her voice raspy and cold. "Almost," Richard replied. "She's being difficult." Martha turned her head slowly and fixed her gaze on me. Her eyes were like two chips of ice. There was no pity in them, no affection, only a deep, simmering contempt. "Difficult," Martha spat the word out. "She's always been difficult, useless girl." My heart shattered into a million pieces. "Martha, I took care of you." "You did what you were supposed to do," Martha barked, slamming her cane against the floor. "You were a wife. That is the job description. Do you want a medal for cooking dinner? Do you want a parade for doing laundry? You are nothing special, Elena. You never were. I told Richard from the start, don't marry the girl from the trailer park. But he was infatuated. Thank God he finally woke up." She shuffled closer to me, her face twisting into a sneer. 7 years, Elena, or 5, whatever it is, and not a single grandchild. You are a dry tree, a barren field. What use is a woman who cannot give a family an heir? You are just a mouth to feed. She looked at Jessica and smiled, a genuine smile I had never received. "Jessica here comes from good stock. Her hips are wide. She will give me a grandson within a year. You are a genetic dead end." I felt physically ill. The cruelty was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. "Get her out of here, Richard," Martha commanded. "The air smells like failure." "I'm trying, Mother," Richard said. "She won't sign." "She doesn't need to sign now," Martha said. "Just get her out. She can sign in the gutter." Martha then turned toward the hallway closet. She opened it and rummaged around for a moment. I watched her, confused through my tears. What was she doing? She pulled out a black, heavy-duty trash bag. It was lumpy, dusty, and looked like it had been sitting in the back of the closet for years. It was tied shut with a rough knot. Martha walked over to me, dragging the bag slightly as if it were heavy. She stopped right in front of me. "Here," she sneered. She lifted the bag and threw it at me. It hit my chest with a surprising force, knocking the wind out of me. I instinctively grabbed it to stop it from falling. It was heavy, much heavier than it looked. What is this?" I gasped. "Your dowry," Martha cackled, a cruel witch-like sound. "That is all the trash you brought into this house. Old clothes, trinkets, garbage. I've been collecting it. Take it. Take your trash and get out of my sight. I don't want to see a single trace of you when I wake up tomorrow." "Take the money, Elena," Richard added, gesturing to the envelope. "And leave. Now. Before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing." Trespassing. In the home I painted, in the home I loved. I looked at them one last time, the trinity of betrayal. My husband, the ambitious coward, his mistress, the smiling vulture, and my mother-in-law, the architect of my misery. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The tears stopped. A cold numbness took over. It was the anesthesia of the soul, protecting me from dying of heartbreak right there on the rug. I reached out and took the envelope with the divorce papers and the check. I held the dirty, heavy trash bag in my other hand. "You're right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't belong here. Not anymore." "Finally," Jessica muttered, checking her nails. I turned around and walked to the door. My legs felt heavy, like lead. I opened the door and the storm blasted into the house. Rain sprayed onto the polished floors. Wind whipped my hair into my face. "Close the door!" Martha shrieked from behind me. "You're letting the heat out!" I stepped out onto the porch and slammed the door behind me. The sound was final. A thunderclap in its own right. I heard the lock click immediately. Richard had locked me out. I was alone. I stood on the porch for a moment, the rain instantly soaking my silk dress, pasting it to my skin. The cold was shocking. It bit into my skin, sharp and merciless. I had no coat. I had left my purse inside. I had no car keys. I had nothing but a check I couldn't cash until morning and a bag of trash. I began to walk. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from that house. I walked down the long driveway, past the rose bushes I had planted, past the mailbox I had painted. I walked onto the dark, slick street. The rain mingled with the hot tears that started flowing again. I walked for miles. The suburban houses gave way to the darker, emptier roads leading toward the city limits. Cars splashed me as they drove by, blinding me with their headlights, but no one stopped. Why would they? I looked like a madwoman, a soaking wet woman in a cocktail dress, carrying a garbage bag in the middle of a storm. After what felt like an eternity, I found a bus stop with a small plastic shelter. I collapsed onto the metal bench, shivering violently. My teeth chattered so hard my jaw ached. I sat there, hugging the trash bag to my chest for warmth. It smelled of dust and old lavender sachets. I looked at it. Martha had called it trash, my belongings. "What do I even have?" I sobbed to myself. "I have nothing." But as I held the bag, I frowned. It felt wrong. It was lumpy, yes, but there were hard, rectangular shapes inside, and it was incredibly heavy. Too heavy for old clothes. Curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for distraction, made me pull at the knot. It was tied tight, but my wet fingers managed to work it loose. "Let's see what garbage she decided to give me," I muttered bitterly. I opened the bag. The dim yellow light of the street lamp illuminated the contents. I expected to see my old college hoodies, maybe some books or broken picture frames. Instead, the first thing I saw was a stack of books. But they weren't books. They were leather-bound ledgers, old, worn leather that looked like it cost a fortune. I reached in and pulled one out. It was heavy. I opened the cover. "Statement of Assets, the Emerald Trust." I frowned. What was this? I flipped the page. Beneficiary, Elena Vance, my maiden name. My heart skipped a beat. I flipped through the pages, bank account numbers, Cayman Island offshore accounts, stock portfolios. The numbers were staggering, 7 figures, 8 figures. "What is this?" I whispered. I dug deeper into the bag. I pushed aside some old newspapers that were used as packing material. My hand touched something cold, metal. I pulled out a small, rusty metal box. It looked like a cookie tin. I pried the lid open. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a set of jewelry. Not costume jewelry. This was real. A necklace of emeralds and diamonds so large they looked fake. A ring with a diamond the size of a grape. A note was tucked under the necklace. Appraised value, $4.5 million. I gasped, nearly dropping the tin. $4.5 million? In a rusty cookie tin? I looked back into the bag. There was more. A thick bundle of documents wrapped in plastic to keep them dry. I tore the plastic open. Property deed, 1205 Skyline Tower, penthouse. Property deed, 4500 Ocean Drive, Malibu. Property deed, commercial complex, 5th Avenue, New York. All of them, every single one, listed under owner, Elena Vance. My head was spinning. I felt like I was in a fever dream. Was I hallucinating from hypothermia? Had I finally snapped? At the very bottom of the bag, taped to the plastic lining, was a white envelope. It was sealed with red wax, an old-fashioned seal with a crest I didn't recognize. On the front, in shaky, spidery handwriting, was my name, Elena. I recognized that handwriting. I had seen it on grocery lists and passive-aggressive sticky notes for 2 years. It was Martha's handwriting. My hands trembled so violently I ripped the envelope slightly as I opened it. I pulled out a 3-page letter. The ink was slightly smudged in places, as if the person writing it had been crying. I brought the letter close to the dim light and began to read. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, it means I have succeeded. It means I have successfully played the role of the villain, the wicked mother-in-law, and the monster long enough to save your life. I know you hate me right now. You should. I spit on you. I threw you out. I called you barren and useless. Every word I said tonight was a dagger in my own heart, but I had to throw them with precision to make it convincing. You see, my child, the Sterling family is rotten. My son, Richard, I failed him. Or perhaps he was just born broken. He has his father's greed, but none of his father's brains. He and that woman Jessica have been plotting against you for a year. I overheard them. They planned to divorce you, but not before they saddled you with the company's massive hidden debts. Richard has been embezzling money, Elena. He has been cooking the books at Titan Tech. He planned to frame you. He put several shell companies in your name without your knowledge. If you had stayed, you wouldn't just be divorced. You would be in federal prison. I couldn't let that happen. You are the only person in this family who ever treated me with genuine kindness. When my arthritis flared up, you massaged my hands. When I was lonely, you sat and listened to my boring stories. You have a heart of gold, Elena, and gold does not belong in the mud. So, I devised a plan. I had to make them believe I was on their side. I had to be cruel to you so they would trust me. I convinced Richard to transfer the toxic assets to a blind trust to hide them from the IRS. He thought he was hiding debt. He didn't check the paperwork. He is lazy. He didn't know I swapped the files. He transferred the Sterling family's remaining clean assets, my private inheritance, the properties, the vintage jewelry, into your name. Everything in this bag is yours. The deeds are legal. The accounts are accessible only by your retina scan and voice print. You are now worth approximately $150 million. Richard thinks he kicked you out with nothing. In reality, he just handed you the kingdom and kept the debt. By tomorrow morning, the auditors will arrive at Titan Tech. I tipped them off. Richard will be arrested within 48 hours. I cannot come with you. I am old, and my place is here, to watch the ship sink. But you must fly. P.S. Look in the side pocket of the bag. There is a phone. It has one number saved. Call him. His name is Mr. Blackwood. He is my personal attorney. He is waiting for your call. He has a car 2 blocks away. Forgive me for the acting, my daughter. Now, go and be the queen you were meant to be. Love, Mom. I lowered the letter. The rain suddenly didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like a baptism, a washing away of the old, weak Elena. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a discarded wife. I was a millionaire. I was the owner of the very ground Richard walked on. Martha. She had saved me. She had orchestrated the most painful, humiliating night of my life just to hand me freedom on a silver platter, or rather, in a garbage bag. I laughed, a sound that started low in my chest and erupted into the night air. It was a laugh of disbelief, of relief, of power. I reached into the side pocket of the bag. Sure enough, there was a sleek black smartphone. It was fully charged. I pressed the single contact, Mr. Blackwood. It rang once. Mrs. Sterling. A deep, calm voice answered immediately. I have the GPS tracker on the phone. I see you are at the bus stop on Elm Street. My driver is 30 seconds away. Are you safe? I am, I replied. My voice was no longer the trembling whisper of a broken wife. It was steady. It was strong. I have the package. Excellent, Mr. Blackwood said. We have a suite prepared at the Mandarin Oriental, and we have a lot of paperwork to sign before the markets open tomorrow. Are you ready to begin the hostile takeover? I looked down the dark road toward the house I used to call home. I imagined Richard and Jessica toasting with their champagne, thinking they had won. I imagined them sleeping in the bed I made, oblivious to the fact that the roof was about to collapse on their heads. "I'm ready," I said into the phone. "Let's burn it all down." A pair of headlights appeared around the corner. A long, sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb, splashing the puddle water away. But this time, the car stopped. The driver, a large man in a suit, jumped out with an umbrella and opened the back door for me. "Ms. Vance?" he said, bowing his head respectfully. I grabbed the trash bag, my fortune, my future, and stepped into the warmth of the car. As the door closed, shutting out the storm in the past, I knew one thing for certain. Elena the housewife died tonight in the rain. Elena the CEO was just born. The leather seat of the limousine was soft, enveloping me like a warm embrace, a stark contrast to the cold, biting wind I had left behind just minutes ago. The city lights of Seattle blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of gold and red against the black canvas of the night. For years, I had watched these limousines from the bus stop, wondering what kind of people sat inside them. I used to think they were aliens, creatures from a world I could never touch. Now, I was one of them. But I didn't feel like an alien. I felt like a ghost returning to haunt the living. My hands were still clutching the black trash bag. It was absurd, really. Sitting in a $500,000 car, holding a bag that smelled of my mother-in-law's attic. But I couldn't let it go. It was my lifeline, my weapon. "We are arriving, Ms. Vance," the driver announced, his voice smooth and professional. The car glided to a stop in front of the Mandarin Oriental. The doorman, dressed in a pristine uniform, opened the door before the vehicle had even fully settled. He didn't look at the trash bag with disgust. He didn't look at my muddy shoes or my ruined dress. He looked at me with absolute deference. "Welcome home, Ms. Vance," he said. Home. The word tasted strange. My home was a suburban house 5 miles away, where my husband was currently sleeping with another woman. But as I stepped into the lobby with its towering marble pillars and the scent of white orchids, I realized that home is not a place. It's a position of power. And for the first time in my life, I had the keys. Mr. Blackwood was waiting for me in the presidential suite on the top floor. The elevator ride was silent, but my mind was screaming. Can I do this? Can I really be the person Martha believes I am? I caught my reflection in the polished brass doors. I looked like a drowned rat, mascara running down my cheeks, hair plastered to my skull. But my eyes were different. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The suite was larger than my entire house. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a city that now, according to the documents in my bag, I owned a significant piece of. Mr. Blackwood stood by the fireplace. He was an older man, sharp features, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. He looked like a shark that had learned to smile. "Ms. Vance," he said, gesturing to a velvet armchair. "Please, sit. I've ordered tea and a change of clothes, but first, we must secure the assets." I sat down, placing the trash bag on the mahogany coffee table. "Start talking, Mr. Blackwood. I need to understand everything." He opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a series of files. "It's quite simple, really. Your mother-in-law, Martha Sterling, was a genius. She saw the writing on the wall years ago. Titan Tech, the company your husband is so proud of, is a sinking ship. Richard has been inflating the numbers to keep the stock price up. It's classic fraud, Ponzi scheme tactics." I gasped. He's a criminal?" "He is," Blackwood confirmed, "and he planned to pin it on you. See this?" He slid a document toward me. "He opened 3 shell companies in your name using your social security number. The plan was to transfer the debt to these companies, then file for divorce. When the SEC investigated, they would find your name on the debt, not his. You would have gone to prison for 20 years. The room went cold. I felt bile rise in my throat. I knew Richard was selfish. I knew he was unfaithful. But this was evil. He wasn't just discarding me, he was planning to bury me alive. He was going to send me to jail?" I whispered. "Yes," Blackwood said, his voice grim. But Martha intercepted the mail. She intercepted the notary. She switched the documents. The shell companies he thinks are in your name? They are actually in his name. He signed them without reading. He was too busy buying jewelry for his mistress. Blackwood leaned forward, a wicked glint in his eye. Here is the situation, Elena. You own the Emerald Trust. This trust holds the deed to the Sterling family estate, the commercial properties, and, this is the best part, you are now the majority creditor of Titan Tech's private debt. In layman's terms, you own his debt. You own his house. You own the very chair he sits on at work. I looked at the documents. The numbers were dizzying, but one thought cut through the fog. So I can destroy him? Blackwood smiled. You can delete him. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably laughing, telling Jessica how smart he was for getting rid of me. Do it, I said, my voice vibrating against the glass. Freeze everything. I want him to wake up in a world where he doesn't even own his toothbrush. The next morning, 8 a.m. The sunlight hit my face, but I didn't wake up in my cramped bedroom. I woke up in 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets. For a second, I panicked, thinking I had overslept for my shift at the diner. Then, memory flooded back. The storm, the bag, the betrayal, the billions. I got out of bed. Mr. Blackwood had arranged for a team of stylists to come to the suite at 7 a.m. They were waiting in the living area. Ms. Vance, the lead stylist, a woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper bob, nodded. Mr. Blackwood said you need a war cabinet look. Elegant, intimidating, expensive. I looked at the rack of clothes they had brought. Chanel suits, Armani coats, Louboutin heels. It was a world away from my TJ Maxx clearance rack. I don't just want to look rich, I said, running my hand over a red silk blazer. I want to look like I own the building. Say no more, she smiled. 2 hours later, I stood in front of the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. The mousy, tired housewife was gone. In her place stood a queen. I wore a tailored crimson pantsuit that fit like a second skin. My hair, usually tied in a messy bun, was blown out in sleek, glossy waves. My makeup was flawless, highlighting the sharp cheekbones I didn't know I had, and on my finger, I wore the sapphire ring from the rusty tin box, the heart of the Sterling legacy. I was ready. My phone buzzed. It was Blackwood. The trap is set. Richard is currently at the Porsche dealership downtown. He's trying to buy a 911 GT3 for the mistress. I thought you might want to watch the fireworks. I'm on my way, I said. The dealership, 10:30 a.m. The Porsche dealership was a temple of glass and steel. Richard stood in the center of the showroom, laughing loudly. Jessica was hanging off his arm, pointing at a bright yellow sports car. She looked triumphant. "Oh, Richard, it's perfect," she squealed. "It matches my energy." "Anything for you, babe," Richard said, puffing out his chest. He looked so arrogant, so sure of himself. He was wearing a suit I had ironed for him 2 days ago. I watched from the back of the showroom, hidden behind a display of SUVs. I signaled the manager, whom Blackwood had already briefed. The manager nodded nervously and walked over to Richard. "Mr. Sterling," the manager said politely, "we have the paperwork ready. The total comes to $220,000. How would you like to handle the down payment?" "Put it on the black card," Richard said, slapping a heavy metal credit card onto the desk with a flourish. "Full amount. I don't do payments." Jessica clapped her hands. "My hero!" The manager took the card and inserted it into the machine. Richard smirked, leaning against the counter, whispering something in Jessica's ear that made her giggle. The machine beeped, a harsh, dissonant sound. The manager frowned. He tried again. Beep. "Is there a problem?" Richard asked, annoyed. It says declined, sir," the manager said. "Code 05, do not honor." Richard laughed. "That's impossible. That card has a $500,000 limit. Try it again. Your machine is probably broken." The manager swiped it again. Beep. Declined. "Sir, maybe you should call your bank," the manager suggested, his voice dropping a decibel. "I am the CFO of Titan Tech," Richard barked, his face turning red. "I don't need to call the bank. Here, try this one." He pulled out another card, a platinum Visa. Beep, declined. He pulled out a third, an Amex Gold. Beep, declined. Jessica's smile was starting to falter. She stepped away from him slightly. Richard, what's going on? You said you had the money. I do, Richard yelled. It's a glitch. The bank system must be down. Actually, a voice rang out from the entrance. The system is working perfectly. Richard froze. He knew that voice, but he didn't recognize the tone. It wasn't the submissive, gentle voice of his wife. It was the voice of authority. He turned around. Jessica turned around. The entire dealership fell silent. I stepped out from behind the SUVs. The click-clack of my heels on the polished tile echoed like gunshots. I walked slowly, deliberately toward them. Richard's eyes bulged. He looked at me, at the crimson suit, the hair, the makeup, the sheer aura of power radiating off me, and he blinked. He didn't recognize me for a second. Elena? He stammered. What are you doing here? And where did you get those clothes? Did you steal them? I stopped 5 feet away from him. I looked at Jessica. She looked small now, cheap. Her red dress looked like a costume compared to my tailored elegance. I didn't steal anything, Richard, I said calmly. Unlike you. What are you talking about? Richard hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching. Get out of here. You're embarrassing me. Go back to the trailer park. I ignored him. I turned to the manager. Mr. Henderson, isn't it? Yes, Ms. Vance, the manager said, bowing slightly. I believe this gentleman is attempting to purchase a vehicle with funds he doesn't have, I said. You see, Richard, your assets haven't been glitched. They've been frozen by the primary lien holder of your debt. Lien holder? Richard laughed nervously. I don't have debt. I'm rich. You were living on credit, I corrected, and the credit just ran out. The bank called in your loans this morning, Richard, all of them. The house, the cars, the personal lines of credit. Since you missed the margin call at 9 a.m., they froze your accounts. You're crazy, Richard spat. How would you know any of this? You're just a housewife. I took a step closer. I raised my hand, letting the light catch the massive sapphire ring on my finger. Richard's eyes dropped to the ring. His jaw dropped. He recognized it. It was the ring his mother had kept in the safe deposit box for 40 years. The ring he had begged her to sell to pay off his gambling debts, and she had refused. That's Mother's ring, he whispered. You stole it. You stole the trash bag. She gave it to me, Richard, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. She gave me everything. The ring, the properties, the truth. Truth? The truth about the shell companies, I smiled. The truth about the embezzlement. The truth about how you planned to frame me. Richard's face went pale. All the blood drained from his cheeks. He looked like a ghost. Jessica, realizing the ship was sinking, took another step back. Richard? Jessica said, her voice shrill. What is she talking about? Embezzlement? Shut up, Jessica, Richard snapped. He looked at me, panic setting in. Elena, baby, listen. We can talk about this. You're misunderstanding. Mother is senile. She doesn't know what she's doing. Oh, she knew exactly what she was doing, I said. She was taking out the trash. I turned to the manager. Mr. Henderson, I'd like to buy this car. The yellow one? The manager asked, confused. Yes, I said. I don't like the color, but I think it will make a fantastic donation to the charity auction next week. I'll pay cash. I pulled out a checkbook. Not a joint account, my account, the Emerald Trust. I wrote a check for $220,000 and handed it to the manager. Now, I said, turning back to Richard, I suggest you start walking. Titan Tech has an emergency board meeting in 1 hour, and I hear the new majority shareholder is very difficult. Richard stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He had no car, no credit cards, and his wife, the woman he threw away yesterday, had just bought his mistress's dream car like it was a pack of gum. Who? Richard whispered. Who is the shareholder? I smiled, turned on my heel, and walked toward the door. Over my shoulder, I said, See you in the boardroom, honey. Titan Tech headquarters, 12 p.m. The boardroom of Titan Tech was an imposing space. A long mahogany table surrounded by men in gray suits who looked like they hadn't smiled since the 90s. The air smelled of stale coffee and fear. Richard burst into the room, sweaty and disheveled. He had clearly run part of the way or taken a cab he couldn't pay for. "Sorry I'm late," he gasped, adjusting his crooked tie. "Traffic and banking issues." The chairman of the board, Mr. Sterling Sr., Richard's uncle, a man who tolerated Richard only because of family ties, looked at him with disdain. "Sit down, Richard," the chairman said. "We have a crisis. Our creditors have called in the debt, all of it. $50 million due immediately. If we don't pay by end of day, they are initiating a hostile takeover and liquidating the management team." Richard wiped sweat from his forehead. "What? Who? Which bank?" "It's not a bank," the chairman said. "Our debt was sold 3 days ago to a private equity firm called Phoenix Holdings." "Phoenix Holdings?" Richard frowned. "I've never heard of them." "Well, their representative is here," the chairman said, "and she is not happy." The double doors at the end of the room swung open. The room went silent. I walked in. Flanked by Mr. Blackwood and 2 other aggressive-looking lawyers, I didn't look at the board members. I looked straight at Richard. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You? No. No! This is a joke!" "Sit down, Mr. Sterling," Blackwood barked. "This is my wife!" Richard shouted at the chairman. "She's a waitress. She's mentally unstable. She can't be the representative." "Actually," I spoke up, my voice calm and commanding, "I am the owner of Phoenix Holdings, which means I own your debt, which means, effectively, I own you." I walked to the head of the table. The chairman, sensing the shift in power, actually stood up and offered me his seat. I took it. I placed the heavy leather binder, the one from the trash bag, on the table. "Gentlemen," I said, addressing the board, "I have reviewing the company's financials, and I have found some irregularities." I opened the binder to a page marked with a red sticky note. "It seems the CFO, Mr. Sterling, has been diverting company funds into offshore accounts, specifically to an account in the Cayman Islands under the name Jessica Enterprises." The room erupted. The board members turned on Richard like a pack of wolves. "That's a lie," Richard screamed. "She's planting evidence." "I have the bank transfer receipts," I said, sliding the papers down the table. "Signed by you, Richard. Digital signature and biometric confirmation." Richard looked at the papers. His face crumbled. He realized then that his mother hadn't just given me money. She had given me his digital fingerprint. She had access to everything. "The police are waiting in the lobby," I continued, closing the binder. "But I'm a generous woman. I'm willing to give the board a choice." I looked at Richard, who was now trembling, tears of panic welling in his eyes. "Option A. I call the police up here, and Titan Tech goes down in a scandal that destroys your stock price and your reputations." The board members looked terrified. "And option B?" the chairman asked. "Option B," I said, locking eyes with my husband. "Richard resigns immediately. He signs over his entire stock portfolio to me as restitution for the stolen funds, and he leaves this building with exactly what he gave me last night." "What is that?" Richard whispered. I reached under the table and pulled out a plastic grocery bag I had brought with me. Inside was a single, crumpled $10 bill. I tossed it at him. "Severance pay," I said. "Take it and get out." Richard looked at the money, then at the board members who were glaring at him, then at me. He saw no mercy in my eyes. He saw only the reflection of his own cruelty staring back at him. "Elena, please," he begged, falling to his knees. "Don't do this. I'm your husband." "You filed for divorce yesterday," I reminded him. "Sign the papers, Richard. Sign the resignation, or go to jail." Mr. Blackwood slid the documents in front of him. Richard, sobbing like a child, took the pen. His hand shook so hard he could barely write, but he signed. He signed away his career, his company, and his dignity. "Get him out of my sight," I ordered. Security guards stepped forward and grabbed Richard by the arms. They dragged him out of the boardroom, his expensive Italian shoes dragging on the carpet. As the doors closed behind his wailing figure, silence returned to the room. I looked around the table. "Now that the trash has been taken out," I said, smoothing my crimson blazer, "shall we discuss the future of my company?" The boardroom doors closed behind Richard with a heavy, final thud. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of justice. I sat at the head of the table, the seat Richard had coveted his entire career, and felt a strange sensation. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was relief. The kind of relief you feel when you finally put down a heavy load you've been carrying for miles. "Ms. Vance?" The chairman broke the silence, his voice trembling slightly. "What are your instructions regarding the restructuring?" I looked at the board members. They were terrified. They expected me to be a tyrant, to fire everyone and burn the company to the ground out of spite. "We are not going to burn Titan Tech," I said, my voice steady. "We are going to clean it. We are going to audit every department. We are going to pay back the creditors using the liquidity from the Emerald Trust. And most importantly, we are going to change the culture. No more boys' club, no more hidden accounts." I stood up. "Mr. Blackwood will handle the legalities. I have one more piece of business to attend to. Personal business." I walked out of the skyscraper and back into the waiting limousine. The rain had stopped completely. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. "Where to, Ms. Vance?" the driver asked. "Take me back to the house," I said, "the Sterling estate." 2 p.m. As we approached the familiar suburban street, I saw a scene that looked like it belonged in a tragic comedy. Richard was standing on the sidewalk in front of the house. He was banging on the window of a bright yellow Porsche, the same one I had bought and then ordered to be towed to my storage facility. Inside the car sat Jessica. She had somehow gotten the spare keys from Richard before he left the dealership, thinking she could secure the asset. But the car was immobilized. I had disabled it remotely via the dealership's app. Richard was screaming. "Let me in! Jessica, we need to go! We can sell your jewelry! We can start over!" Jessica rolled down the window just an inch. Her face was twisted in disgust. "Start over?" she screeched. "With what? You have $10, Richard. I just saw the news. You're ruined. You're under investigation for fraud." "But we love each other," Richard pleaded, clutching the door handle. "I loved the CFO of Titan Tech," Jessica spat. "I didn't love a broke, unemployed criminal. You told me you were rich. You lied to me." She unlocked the door, not to let him in, but to get out. She grabbed her purse and pushed past him. "Where are you going?" Richard cried, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch me," she yelled, shoving him away. He stumbled and fell onto the wet grass, the same grass I used to mow. "I'm calling an Uber. I'm going back to my apartment. Don't ever call me again." She marched away, her heels clicking on the pavement, leaving Richard sitting in the mud, holding his crumpled $10 bill. The limousine pulled up quietly behind him. I didn't get out. I just rolled down the window. Richard looked up. He saw me. He saw the car. He saw the cold, impassive look on my face. "Elena," he whispered, scrambling to his feet. He ran toward the car. "Elena, please, look at her. She left me. You were right. She's a gold digger. But you loved me when I was nothing. Please, baby, take me back. I made a mistake. I'll change." I looked at him. The man I had worshipped. The man I had starved for. He looked pathetic. Small. "You're right, Richard," I said softly. "I did love you when you were nothing. But the problem is, you are still nothing. You never grew. You just got more expensive." "I'm your husband," he wailed. "Mr. Blackwood filed the expedited divorce papers this morning," I said, citing adultery and financial fraud. "You signed them in the boardroom, remember? You're not my husband. You're just a trespasser on my property." I pressed the button to roll up the window. "Elena, no! Mom! Where is Mom?" he shouted, banging on the glass. I tapped the intercom. "Driver, the gate." The iron gates of the estate swung open and we drove through, leaving Richard screaming on the other side. He was locked out of the paradise he had never earned. The reunion, 2:30 p.m. The house was quiet, too quiet. I used my key, the key I had never returned, and walked in. "Martha?" I called out. There was no answer. The hallway closet was open, empty of the trash bag that had changed my life. I walked to the living room. There, sitting in her favorite armchair by the cold fireplace, was Martha. She was staring at a photo frame in her lap. It was a picture of Richard when he was a baby. She looked older than she had the night before. Frail. Tired. She heard my footsteps and stiffened. She didn't look up. "Did you do it?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Is he gone?" "He's gone, Martha," I said gently. "He's outside the gate. Jessica left him. He has nothing." Martha let out a long, shuddering breath. A single tear rolled down her wrinkled cheek and landed on the glass of the photo frame. "I am a terrible mother," she whispered. "A mother is supposed to protect her child, and I just destroyed mine." I walked over and knelt beside her chair. I took her cold, trembling hands in mine. "No, Mom," I said firmly. "You didn't destroy him. You stopped him. You stopped him from destroying himself and everyone around him. If you hadn't done this, he would be in prison for 20 years. Now, he has a chance. A hard chance, but a chance to learn what it means to actually work for a living." Martha finally looked at me. Her gray eyes were filled with pain, but also relief. She touched my face, her fingers tracing my jawline. "I was so cruel to you last night," she said, her voice breaking. "Calling you trash, spitting on you. Can you ever forgive me?" "Forgive you?" I smiled, tears welling in my own eyes. "You saved my life. You gave me a future. You are the only mother I have." I reached into my purse and pulled out the massive sapphire ring, the heart of the Sterling legacy. I took her hand and slipped it back onto her finger. "This belongs to you," I said. Martha shook her head. "No, it belongs to the matriarch of the family, and that is no longer me. It's you." She took the ring off and pressed it into my palm. "Keep it, wear it, build something better than I ever could, but promise me one thing, Elena." "Anything." "Don't let this house become a museum," she said. "Fill it with life, fill it with laughter, and please, hire a cook. Your roast lamb was always a little dry." We both laughed. It was a wet, teary laugh, but it was genuine. For the first time in 5 years, the wall between us was gone. We weren't mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were partners, survivors. 5 years later. Time has a way of rewriting history. The scandal of Titan Tech faded from the headlines, replaced by the success story of Phoenix Holdings. Under my leadership, the company didn't just recover, it soared. We shifted focus from hardware to renewable energy. We built schools. We launched the Vance Initiative, a scholarship fund for spouses who had been financially abused and abandoned. I became a symbol. The Phoenix of Seattle, they called me. I never remarried. I didn't feel the need to. My life was full. I had my work, I had my charities, and I had Martha. We lived together in the estate. We renovated it, removing the cold, gray decor Richard loved and filling it with warm colors, art, and light. Martha lived her final years in peace, surrounded by the garden she loved. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep last winter, she held my hand and told me she was proud. That was the only validation I ever needed. One rainy afternoon, I was leaving a charity gala downtown. I was wearing a silver gown, wrapped in a fur coat, protected by an umbrella held by my bodyguard. As I walked toward my car, a man stepped out of the shadows of the alley. He was wearing a uniform, a janitor's jumpsuit. He looked aged, his face lined with deep wrinkles, his hair thinning and gray. He was holding a mop bucket. He stopped when he saw me. He froze. It was Richard. He looked at me. He looked at the diamonds around my neck. He looked at the peace in my eyes. I stopped. I signaled my bodyguard to wait. "Hello, Richard," I said. He swallowed hard, gripping the handle of the mop. "Elena, you look good." "I am good," I said. "How are you?" He looked down at his boots. "I'm surviving. I work the night shift here. It's honest work. Hard." "Good," I said. "Hard work is good for the soul." He looked up, a glimmer of the old desperation in his eyes. Elena, I heard about Mom. I didn't have the money to come to the funeral. I know, I said. She knew too. She left you something in her will. Richard's eyes widened. She did? Money? No, I said. She left you a letter and a photo album of when you were a boy. She wanted you to remember who you were before the greed took over. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small envelope. I had carried it with me for months, waiting for this moment. Here, I handed it to him. He took it with trembling hands. Elena, is there any chance for us? I've changed. I've really changed. I looked at him with pity, but no longing. The anger was gone. The hate was gone. There was just nothing. I'm glad you've changed, Richard, I said softly. But some bridges once burned can never be crossed again. You threw away a diamond to pick up a rock. You can't blame the diamond for shining somewhere else. I turned away. Elena, he called out one last time. What was in the trash bag, really? Besides the money? I paused at the door of my car. I looked back at him, standing in the rain, a janitor in the city he once thought he owned. My dignity, I answered, and your future. I got into the car. The door closed. As we drove away, I didn't look back. Conclusion. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is not about making the other person suffer. It's about succeeding so brightly that their darkness can no longer touch you. I kept the trash bag. It hangs in a frame in my office, a reminder of where I came from. It reminds me that sometimes, when life throws you out like garbage, it's actually setting you free. My name is Elena Vance. I was a wife. I was a victim. I was a discard. Now, I am the owner of my own destiny, and I have never been happier. Thank you for listening to my confession. If you are sitting in a storm right now, holding a bag of broken dreams, remember this. Open the bag. The treasure might be hidden right underneath the pain. Until next time.